Good afternoon. My name is Sebastian Rusin, and I'm a tax partner at KPMG Canada's new Oakville office. With me here is Blaine Cameron, the business unit leader for the tax practice for Regions East in Canada. So we've got the 2020 budget coming down in the next few weeks, Blaine. What do you think we can expect from a national perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. That's a good question, quite honestly. This is going to be the first budget of the Liberal Party's minority mandate. So it'll be really interesting to understand kind of what they're proposing. Historically, we've seen in a minority government, quite frankly, a lot of things do in fact get done under a minority mandate. So it will be really interesting to see how the Liberals will tackle the current economic situation here in Canada. We've heard certain things where Minister Morneau has been fairly clear in terms of the environment is definitely going to be a topic of conversation, a topic of interest. I think there's going to be some social programs introduced as it relates to health and safety for Canadians. From a tax landscape though, Sebastian, I think we've got a little less clarity. When you kind of go back over the last couple of years, between Canada and the United States, we've seen a fairly significant change. 2 years ago, we saw U.S. tax reform. And what that meant was the U.S. effective tax rate between the federal rate and the state rate went from 39% down to about 26%. And consequently, Canada really lost some competitive advantage in that regard because we hover around 27%, depending what province you're in. But I think that situation has really impacted us from a Canadian corporate perspective. I know Department of Finance has certainly hinted on certain changes, one of which is the way companies are capitalized. And I know you certainly know a lot about this situation, but we've heard comments from finance where they may introduce measures to limit interest deductibility on certain debt.
Sure. So that's what you're referring to there is where a corporation has $250,000 of interest expense, then that amount is going to be limited to 30% of their EBITDA. Now, there is a carve-out for that for small CCPCs. Effectively, what that means is any CCPC that is going to be earning less than $500,000 of active business income and have less than $10 million of taxable capital should be exempt from the introduction of this new limitation.
Right. So I think for businesses in Oakville, that could have an impact in terms of how those organizations are capitalized, and quite frankly, how the investors are realizing a certain yield. So that's certainly one thing we're very mindful of. I think from a personal perspective, the Liberals again have made it quite clear that they're focused on that middle class, right? And so it'll be interesting to see, you're very familiar with that, certainly walking through a number of personal tax clients here in Oakville. But I think we're going to see a little bit of change for middle class to give them a bit of tax break. And similarly, again, for folks here in Oakville, we've heard a lot about this luxury tax. So it'll be important to kind of see where Morneau kind of goes with that. Again, we've heard rumors, and you would certainly be up to speed on those kind of initiatives.
Right, so on the personal side, the Liberals are proposing an increase in the basic personal amount up to $15,000 over the course of the next 4 years. So that's going to start in 2020 and fully phased in by 2024. Now, one thing to note on that is that the basic personal exemption, they're also talking about phasing it out at an income level of $147,000 and it being fully phased out by around $214,000. So what that means is if you're making $214,000 on an annual basis, you're no longer entitled to the basic personal amount. And just sort of to touch upon the luxury tax, yes, they've been talking about that as well. And what they're suggesting there is any sort of boats, automobiles, or planes, if you were to purchase one, and it costs you in excess of $100,000, and you'd be paying a 10% luxury tax. So I mean, you can sort of you can manage that on an automobile. I'm not sure you're going to manage that on an airplane, but yeah, that certainly was part of their mandate.
Yeah. And it goes without saying, Sebastian, obviously the environment is playing a big role here today. And so I think Morneau will address the environment. We've seen a number of initiatives coming down over the last couple of years, but there has been discussion in terms of some of those organizations or companies that are developing clean air technologies or technologies or products with zero emission. They in fact may get a corporate tax break up to 50%, right, of the regular rate. So that'll be curious and interesting to kind of see what he really does to drive that forward.
Right. So, So I mean, just to put to quantify that, so the small business rate would go down from 9% to 4.5%, and all other corporations would go down from 15 to 7.5%.
Right.
And I guess what would happen there is they just build on the 2019 budget incentives with respect to things like Class 54, where they would allow you for zero emissions vehicles to write off the entire vehicle all in 1 year, rather than declining balance as we've historically seen.
Yeah, that accelerated depreciation for sure.
And the other thing to note about the Class 54 is they've added, historically was you were limited to $30,000 of capital cost. They increased that by $25,000 as well. So they certainly look like they're providing incentives in order to generate.
No, I think you're right, Sebastian. We've seen the government kind of lay a foundation on an environmental platform, and I think this year we're just going to see more and more substance to that initiative for sure. And I guess that's actually a pretty good segue in terms of, as it relates to laying foundation. Canada has always had a very strong competitive advantage when it comes to research and development and attracting innovation here, and certainly in Southern Ontario, Oakville, for sure, we see a lot of that. There's been a bit of a shift in terms of putting money into the typical tax credit program. A lot of organizations would claim a percentage of expenditures and receive a tax credit for that. Over the last few years, we've actually seen a bit of a migration or shift in terms of more of a grant-based initiative. And I think that that's something, again, Morneau is very interested in, so that regardless of, or instead of, I'll call it, giving a credit for past activities, it's really funding dollars directly to our organization to facilitate that innovation, to facilitate, new talent, staying in Canada, all that kind of stuff. And so I think we're going to see perhaps more and more of that grant-based approach.
Yeah, and you could be right, Blaine. I mean, that's just going to be a continuation, I think, of some of the 2019 policies that they brought in, like the Canada Training Benefit, where workers or employees received up to it's $250 per year, up to a maximum of $5,000 as a credit for any sort of training or redevelopment of their skill sets that they needed to incur throughout the year.
Yeah, that talent is again becoming a big issue, I think, for our country as a whole.
Agreed.
So it'll be interesting, right? Regardless of kind of what Morneau comes out with, I think it's going to be very impactful, and it's certainly exciting for us, and I'm sure very exciting for those organizations here in Oakville as well. I'd encourage anyone, right, who to stay current on any budget related matters at kpmg.ca/federal budget, or certainly follow us as KPMG folks here on our social media feeds.